The restaurant went still. Not the comfortable quiet of a dinner service winding down, but the breathless silence of a wolf entering a room of rabbits. Taehyun Park, the shadow king of Manhattan's Korean underworld, didn't just arrive, he conquered. He glanced at me, an exhausted black waitress in a worn coral uniform, and muttered something in Korean to his bodyguard, a cutting remark about my skin and my station, assuming I was too ignorant to comprehend. He believed his language was armor. He didn't realize it was my inheritance. When I noticed the ring on his finger, a jade dragon coiled around a blood-red ruby, I didn't just recognize it. I recognized my childhood, and when I spoke those 7 words in perfect Korean, "Sir, my mother has one too," I didn't just shock him, I shattered his world. That was the moment the past came alive. Okay, I'm gonna be honest with you. If you don't like this video now, you're going to forget the title, scroll away, and spend the next 3 weeks trying to remember that one story about the Korean Mafia boss and the waitress. Save yourself the trouble. Like it. Bookmark it. You'll thank me later. The December cold in New York City didn't just chill it cut to the bone. Inside Hwaro, an exclusive Korean fusion restaurant nestled in the heart of Manhattan's Koreatown, the winter wind rattled the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, matching the exhaustion radiating from Nova Sterling. Nova adjusted her black apron, feeling the familiar ache spreading from her lower back down to her calves. It was 11 p.m. The kitchen was supposed to close in 10 minutes. Her feet screamed inside her cheap non-slip shoes, and her mind was already calculating the subway route back to her cramped studio in Washington Heights. She had a linguistics final in 3 days, and exactly $38 in tips folded in her pocket, not nearly enough to cover the electric bill due tomorrow. Table 7 just paid. "Marcus," the manager, hissed as he rushed past her, beads of nervous sweat dotting his temple despite the cold. "But don't start closing procedures. We have a VIP reservation." Nova frowned, tucking a stray curl back into her sleek bun. "Marcus, Chef Kim already broke down half the line. Who books a table this late?" "Park Taehyun." The name dropped like a stone into deep water. The entire staff felt the ripples. Even Jin, the line cook who normally had his AirPods in blasting K-hip-hop, went completely still. Everyone in the city knew that name. Park Taehyun wasn't just connected to the Korean Mafia, he was the architect of its modern empire. He was 34, devastatingly handsome, and rumored to have ice water running through his veins where blood should be. He requested the private booth in the back. Marcus whispered urgently, "Nova, you're taking him. You're the only server who doesn't fumble when serving the high-stakes tables." "I fumble," Nova muttered under her breath, straightening her coral collar. "I just don't let them see it." The heavy oak door swung open, releasing a blast of frigid air that carried the scent of snow and expensive cologne. 3 figures entered. The first 2 were mountains of muscle wrapped in black overcoats, their eyes sweeping the restaurant with military precision, cataloging exits and threats. Then Taehyun stepped inside. He was taller than he appeared in the society page photos. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than Nova's entire year of tuition, cut to perfection across broad shoulders and a lean, powerful frame. His hair was styled back from his face, revealing sharp cheekbones and a jawline that could cut glass. Intricate tattoos crawled up from his collar and wrapped around his neck, traditional Korean dragons and tigers, rendered in black and crimson ink. His expression was unreadable, his gaze sweeping past the staff as though they were furniture. "Private room," Taehyun said. His voice was a low rumble, smooth like aged whiskey but carrying the weight of absolute authority. Marcus practically bowed at the waist, his hands trembling slightly. "Of course, Mr. Park. We have everything prepared exactly as you specified." Taehyun ignored him completely, walking with purposeful strides toward the back of the restaurant. He slid into the private booth with casual arrogance, his bodyguards taking positions that effectively blocked both entrances to the dining room. One of them, a bald man with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, positioned himself with a clear line of sight to the entire restaurant. Nova drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. Just another customer, she told herself. Just a man who eats, drinks, and bleeds like everyone else. Take his order, bring his food, collect your tip, and go home. She grabbed a menu and a pitcher of ice water, then walked toward the private booth. The air around his section felt different, heavier, charged with an electric tension that made the hair on her arms stand up. As she approached, Taehyun was checking something on a sleek black phone, his brow furrowed in concentration. But it was his hands that caught her attention. More specifically, his right hand. On his middle finger sat a ring that made Nova's heart stop mid-beat. A jade dragon coiled around a blood-red ruby, the craftsmanship unmistakable traditional Korean metalwork with micro-engravings that caught the light. She knew that design. She had seen it before, years ago, in a small wooden box her mother kept hidden in their apartment. The box her mother would touch with trembling fingers before she disappeared for days at a time. The box that had vanished the night her mother never came home. Nova's hand tightened on the water pitcher. Her pulse hammered in her ears. It couldn't be a coincidence. "Good evening, sir," Nova began, her voice professionally steady even as her mind raced. "Welcome to Hwaro. May I start you with—" Taehyun didn't look up. He waved a dismissive hand, cutting her off mid-sentence. "Bring me the '08 Suntory Yamazaki. Tell the chef I want the galbi gym. If he claims the braising isn't ready, inform him I'll buy this establishment and replace him." Nova blinked at the casual rudeness. She'd dealt with entitled customers before, but this was different. This was power so absolute it didn't even recognize the need for basic courtesy. Then Taehyun turned slightly toward Jinwoo, his bodyguard, who had moved to stand beside the booth. He spoke in rapid Korean, his tone dripping with contempt. "이 흑인 웨이트리스 좀 봐. 여기가 어딘지도 모르는 것 같아. 이런 애들은 김치가 뭔지도 모를 거야. Look at this black waitress. She probably doesn't even know where she is. These people wouldn't know kimchi from ketchup," Jinwoo chuckled, a low, ugly sound that made Nova's skin crawl. Taehyun smirked, turning back to his phone, completely dismissing her existence. He assumed the language barrier was impenetrable. He assumed she was just background noise, as forgettable as the wallpaper. Nova stood frozen for 3 heartbeats. The insult about her intelligence stung. The racist dismissal burned, but it was the ring that ignited something deeper, something that had been buried for 15 years. She didn't move toward the kitchen. Instead, her eyes locked onto his hand. When Nova spoke, her voice was quiet but carried across the private room with crystal clarity. She spoke in flawless Seoul Korean, with the formal honorifics of someone who understood not just the language, but the hierarchy embedded within it. "Shirley-hamnida Poxy. Kubanji." "Excuse me, Mr. Park. That ring." Taehyun's head snapped up. His eyes widened fractionally, the first genuine emotion she'd seen cross his face. Nova took 1 step closer, her hand steady despite the earthquake happening inside her chest. She pointed at the ring, and when she spoke again, her voice didn't waver. "제 어머니도 똑같은 반지를 가지고 계셨습니다." "Oh, my mother had the exact same ring." The color drained from Taehyun's face. For a moment, he didn't breathe. He stared at her as if she'd just spoken a dead language, as if she'd conjured a ghost into the room. His jaw tightened, the muscles working beneath his skin. Jinwoo's hand moved instinctively toward the inside of his jacket. "What did you say?" Taehyun asked in English, his voice dangerously quiet, but his eyes were no longer cold. They were burning with something Nova couldn't name. Shock, recognition, fear. Nova held his gaze, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might shatter her ribs. She switched to English, her voice steady and clear. "Your ring, sir. The jade dragon with the ruby center. My mother had one exactly like it. I remember because she never took it off, not even when we had nothing else left." The silence that followed was suffocating. Taehyun slowly, deliberately, placed his phone face down on the table. He leaned forward, his entire attention focused on Nova, with an intensity that felt like standing in front of a furnace. "What?" he said slowly, each word carefully measured. "Was your mother's name?" Nova's throat tightened. She hadn't spoken her mother's full name out loud in years, not since the police closed the missing persons case, not since she'd been shuffled into the foster system, not since she'd learned to bury that part of her history beneath layers of normalcy and academic achievement. Sterling, Nova whispered. Her name was Yoon-hee Sterling. If Taehyun had looked pale before, now he looked like he'd seen a ghost rise from the grave. He shot to his feet so fast his phone clattered to the floor. Jinwoo immediately moved forward, but Taehyun held up a hand, stopping him cold. The Mafia boss stared at Nova, really looked at her for the first time, taking in her face, her eyes, the curve of her cheekbones. Yoon-hee? He breathed, and the name sounded like a prayer, or a curse. You're Yoon-hee's daughter. It wasn't a question. It was an accusation, a revelation, a detonation. Nova took an instinctive step back, suddenly aware that she'd just opened a door she didn't understand. Did you know her? Did you know my mother? Taehyun's expression shifted through a dozen emotions in the span of seconds. Shock, grief, rage, something that almost looked like fear. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough, barely above a whisper. Know her? He let out a bitter laugh that held no humor whatsoever. Your mother wasn't just someone I knew, Nova Sterling. He held up his hand, the ring catching the light. She was my father's most trusted operative, his advisor, his translator between the old world and the new. He paused, his jaw clenching. She was family, and 20 years ago she betrayed us and vanished with intelligence that could have buried our entire organization. The Jade Dragon Triad has been hunting her for 2 decades. Nova's world tilted on its axis. Taehyun stepped closer, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. And now, you're going to tell me everything you know, because if you're wearing her face and speaking our language, you're either the key to finding her or you're the leverage the Triad has been waiting for. He gestured to Jinwoo. Lock the doors. No one leaves. We're closing this restaurant for the night. Nova's pulse thundered in her ears. The menu slipped from her fingers, hitting the floor with a soft thud. She'd come to work expecting another ordinary night of serving bibimbap and pouring soju. Instead, she'd just unlocked a mystery that had haunted her entire life and walked straight into the crosshairs of a war she didn't know she was born into. The restaurant went completely silent, and Nova Sterling realized with crystalline clarity. Everything she thought she knew about her mother, her past, and herself was a lie. The truth was far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. Nova's hands didn't shake as she placed the menu on the lacquered table, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Taehyun Park sat before her like a coiled viper, his presence suffocating the air from the room. The ring glinted under the ambient lighting, a reminder of everything she'd lost, everything she'd buried. I asked you a question, Taehyun said, his voice dangerously soft. He hadn't sat back down. He stood less than 3 feet from her, close enough that she could see the intricate details of the tiger tattoo curling up his neck. How does a waitress in Koreatown know about a ring that only 5 people in the world possess? Behind him, Jinwoo shifted his weight, his hand still hovering near his jacket. The other bodyguard had moved to block the kitchen entrance. Across the restaurant, Marcus stood frozen by the host stand, his face pale with terror. The handful of remaining diners had gone completely silent, sensing the predator among them. Nova's mouth went dry, but she forced herself to meet Taehyun's gaze. I already told you. My mother— Your mother, Taehyun interrupted, his voice rising slightly, was one of 3 people my father trusted with his life. She spoke 6 languages. She brokered peace between families that had been at war for generations, and then she vanished with intelligence worth $50 million and nearly got my entire family executed by the Triads. He took another step closer. Nova could smell his cologne now, something expensive and dark, cedar and smoke. So I'll ask you again. And this time, think very carefully about your answer. His eyes bored into hers. What do you know about Yoon-hee Sterling, and why are you really working in this restaurant? The accusation hit Nova like a physical blow. He thought she was a plant, a spy, someone sent to infiltrate his world. I don't know anything, Nova said, and she hated how her voice wavered. My mother disappeared when I was 5 years old. She left me with a neighbor and never came back. I've been in foster care. I put myself through school, and I work here because I need to eat. That's it. That's my entire story. Something flickered across Taehyun's face, doubt, maybe, or calculation. He studied her with the intensity of someone reading a contract for hidden clauses. "You speak Korean," he said finally. "Not just speak it. You speak it perfectly. Seoul dialect, formal register. That's not something you pick up from K-dramas." Nova lifted her chin, finding a spark of defiance through the fear. "My mother taught me when I was young." After she left, my father made sure I kept learning. He hired tutors, even when we could barely afford rent. He made me practice until my pronunciation was flawless, until I could shift between formal and casual speech without thinking. I thought he just wanted me to remember her. Now I wonder if he was preparing me for something. Her voice dropped. He used to tell me stories too. Bedtime stories about a tiger and a serpent who fought over hidden treasure, about a bluebird who could see what others couldn't. I thought they were just fairy tales to help me sleep. But maybe they were something else. Maybe he was teaching me things I'd need to know someday. Taehyun's expression shifted slightly. "Your father, what happened to him?" "He died 3 years ago," Nova said quietly. "Heart attack. At least, that's what they told me." "그렇군요." "I see." Taehyun switched back to Korean, his tone shifting. "그럼 이건 이해하겠네요. Then you'll understand this." He turned slightly toward Jinwoo and spoke in rapid, crude Korean, the language of the streets, laced with contempt. "이 여자, 뭔가 숨기고 있어. 흑인 주제에 한국말을 저렇게 잘하는 건 이상해. 나중에 조사해봐." "가족 관계, 은행 기록, 전부 다." "This woman is hiding something. It's suspicious that someone black speaks Korean that well. Look into her later. Family connections, bank records, everything." The casual racism in his tone ignited something in Nova's chest. Not fear, but fury. Years of being too black for Asian spaces, and too Asian for black spaces. Years of code switching, of proving herself, of being invisible until someone needed to put her in her place. She'd had enough. Nova straightened to her full height and responded in the most formal, aristocratic Korean she knew, the language of old Seoul families, of diplomats and scholars. "박 사장님," she began, her voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "제가 비록 이 식당에서 일하는 사람이지만 님의 무례함을 참을 의무는 없습니다. Mr. Park, though I work in this restaurant, I am not obligated to tolerate your disrespect." Taehyun's eyes widened. Nova wasn't finished. She took a deliberate step forward, closing the distance he'd created, refusing to be intimidated. "제 피부색으로 제 지능을 판단하시는 건 님의 무식함을 드러내는 겁니다. 그리고 비싼 옷이 인격을 만들어주지 않습니다. 예의는 배우는 겁니다, 박 사장님." "돈으로 살 수 없습니다." "Judging my intelligence by my skin color only reveals your ignorance, and expensive clothes don't create character. Manners are learned, Mr. Park. They cannot be bought." The restaurant had gone sepulchral. Jinwoo's mouth fell open. Marcus looked like he might faint. Even the remaining diners sat frozen, witnesses to something impossible. A waitress had just dressed down the head of the Korean Mafia like a misbehaving child. Taehyun stared at her for 5 heartbeats. 10. His jaw worked, muscles tensing and releasing. Nova braced herself for violence, for rage, for whatever came next. Then Taehyun laughed. It wasn't a polite chuckle. It was a deep, genuine laugh that rumbled from his chest, completely transforming his face. The coldness in his expression melted, replaced by something far more dangerous. Fascination. "Norlawande." "Incredible," he murmured, still in Korean. He turned to Jinwoo. "She just called me ignorant and uncultured, in formal Korean, to my face." Jinwoo looked between them, clearly unsure whether to shoot Nova or applaud her. Taehyun turned back to Nova, and his expression had shifted entirely. The contempt was gone. In its place was a sharp, predatory interest that made Nova's skin prickle. "What's your name?" he asked in English. "Nova Sterling. Nova Sterling," he repeated, testing the syllables. He tilted his head slightly, studying her as if seeing her for the first time. "You have your mother's fire. I remember that about Yoonhee, she never backed down from anyone, not even my father when he was wrong." He reached into his jacket. Nova tensed, but he pulled out a business card, placing it deliberately on the table between them. "I'm going to find out everything about you," Taehyun said calmly. "Where you live, who you know, what you're hiding. And when I do, we're going to have a very long conversation about your mother and what happened 20 years ago." He gestured to Jinwoo, and both bodyguards began moving toward the exit. "Wait," Nova said, her voice cracking slightly. "You knew her. You knew my mother. Please, I need to know what happened to her. I need to know if she's alive." Taehyun paused at the edge of the private booth, his back to her. When he spoke, his voice was soft but carried clearly. "Your mother made powerful enemies, Nova Sterling, the kind who don't forgive and don't forget. If she's alive, she's running. And if you're as smart as you seem, you'll stop asking questions before those same enemies realize you exist." He started walking toward the exit, then stopped one final time, turning to look at her over his shoulder. "But something tells me you won't take that advice. You're too much like her." His gaze locked onto hers, and Nova saw something flicker there, a warning, or perhaps a challenge. "Be careful, Nova. The world your mother lived in doesn't have room for innocence. And now that I know who you are, neither do you." The door closed behind him with a soft click that sounded like a death knell. Nova stood alone in the empty private booth, her hands trembling, the business card resting on the table like a loaded gun. On the other side of the restaurant, Marcus's phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, his face draining of all color. "Nova," he whispered, his voice shaking. There's a car outside. Black SUV. They're watching the restaurant. They're watching you." Nova's blood turned to ice. She walked to the window and peered through the rain-streaked glass. A black SUV sat across the street, engine running, windows tinted dark. But it wasn't Taehyun's vehicle. His had already pulled away. This was someone else. As Nova watched, the rear window rolled down just enough for her to see a flash of something inside, the glint of metal, a camera lens, or a rifle scope. Her phone vibrated in her apron pocket. Unknown number. Against every instinct, she answered. The voice on the other end spoke in Mandarin-accented English, cold and precise. "Nova Sterling, daughter of the ghost. We've been looking for you for a very long time. Your mother stole something that belongs to us. You're going to give it back, or you're going to die the way she did." The line went dead. Nova's phone slipped from her fingers, clattering to the floor. Across the street, the SUV's headlights flared to life, and Nova realized with horrifying clarity that her life as she knew it had just ended. Taehyun came back the next night, and the night after that, and the night after that. For 7 consecutive nights, he arrived at Hwaro at exactly 10 p.m., always requesting Nova's section, always sitting in the private booth. He never brought his full entourage anymore, just Jinwoo, silent as a shadow in the corner. And every night, he watched her. Not the casual observation of a customer, this was the focused attention of a predator studying prey. He tracked her movements as she navigated between tables, noted how she code-switched between English and Korean with other staff, observed the way she carried herself with a dignity that belied her worn uniform and exhausted eyes. Nova tried to ignore him, but it was impossible. His presence was a weight she felt every second of her shift. And the black SUV was always there when she left, sometimes across the street, sometimes a block away, but always watching. On the 3rd night, Nova found a manila folder on her station when she arrived for her shift. Her name was printed on the tab in neat Korean characters. Her hands shook as she opened it. Everything was there. Columbia University transcripts, linguistics major, 3.9 gigapascals, student loan statements, $47,000 in debt. Her lease agreement for the Washington Heights studio, 3 months behind on rent. Bank statements showing a balance of $340. Even her foster care records from when she was 7 until she aged out at 18. Marcus found her in the walk-in freezer, hyperventilating into her apron. "He knows everything about me," Nova whispered, vapor clouds forming with each word. "How is that even legal?" Marcus's face was grim. "Men like Park Tae-hyun don't worry about legal, Nova. They worry about useful." That night, when Nova approached Tae-hyun's table with his usual order, he slid a black envelope across the polished wood surface. Open it, he said simply. Inside was cash, a thick stack of $100 bills bound with a red band. Nova's fingers froze on the envelope's edge. $15,000, Tae-hyun said, his voice casual as if discussing the weather. For one dinner. 3 hours of your time. We eat, we talk in Korean. You tell me about your mother. That's all. Nova's throat tightened. That money would pay off her rent, cover 2 months of student loans, buy her breathing room she desperately needed. It was survival, wrapped in cash. She looked up at Tae-hyun. He was watching her, waiting, testing her. I'm here to work, Mr. Park, Nova said, sliding the envelope back across the table. Not to be purchased. She picked up the teapot from the service cart, her movements deliberate and graceful despite the tremor in her hands. She poured his tea with perfect precision the way her mother had taught her before she vanished, holding the pot at exactly the right angle, filling the cup to precisely 7/10 full. Your galbi gym will be ready in 15 minutes, she said in flawless formal Korean. Please enjoy your tea. She turned and walked away, her spine straight, refusing to look back even though she could feel his gaze burning into her shoulder blades. Behind her, she heard Jin-woo whisper urgently in Korean, Boss, she just turned down 15 grand like it was pocket change. Is she insane? Taehyun's response was so quiet Nova almost missed it. No, she's perfect. The words sent ice down her spine. That night, as Nova left through the staff entrance at 1 a.m., she noticed a different car, a silver sedan parked across the street, engine running, a figure in the driver's seat tracking her movement. The next morning, the same car followed her to Columbia. She spotted it again outside the library, and again outside the bodega where she bought her coffee. Nova's phone rang as she walked across campus. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. You can't be followed if you know who's following you. Taehyun's voice came through, smooth and unsettling. The silver sedan is mine. Consider it protection. Protection from what? Nova demanded, stopping dead on the crowded sidewalk. Students flowed around her like water around a stone. From the people who called you, the ones watching you that night. The Jade Dragon Triad doesn't make idle threats, Nova. They killed 3 people last week who had information about your mother. You think they'll hesitate with you? Nova's blood ran cold. You're having me followed because you want to use me as bait. There was a pause. Then, I'm having you followed because you're valuable. And in my world, valuable things don't last long unprotected. The line went dead. Nova stood frozen on the Columbia campus, students streaming past, the autumn sun bright and normal, and completely at odds with the nightmare her life had become. That evening, when she arrived at Hwaro for her shift, Marcus was waiting by the staff entrance. His face was ashen. Don't go in, he said, grabbing her arm. Nova, don't. But it was too late. She'd already seen through the window. Taehyun sat at his usual table, but he wasn't alone. Across from him sat a woman in an elegant black dress, her hair pulled back severely, her face strikingly beautiful and carved from the same ice as Taehyun's. She wore a jade bracelet that seemed to echo his ring. And as Nova watched, the woman pulled out a photograph and slid it across the table. Even from a distance, even through the window, Nova recognized the image. It was her mother. Younger, vibrant, alive, standing next to a man Nova had never seen before. A man whose face was identical to Taehyun's, just 20 years older. The woman in black looked up, her eyes finding Nova through the window with predatory precision. She smiled coldly. Then she pulled out a gun and placed it on the table next to the photograph, not pointing it at Taehyun, just displaying it. A message. A threat. Taehyun's expression didn't change, but his jaw tightened. Nova's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Come inside, Nova Sterling. It's time you learned the truth about what your mother really was, and what that makes you. The woman in black was still smiling. Nova's hands shook as she pushed through the door. The woman stood as she approached, her movements graceful and controlled. Miss Sterling? The woman said in perfect English with a slight Korean accent. I am Madam Park, Taehyun's aunt, and I have been waiting a very long time to meet Yoon-hee's daughter. She gestured to the photograph on the table. My brother Taehyun's father loved your mother very much. He gave her everything. That ring, a place in our family, protection, and she repaid him with betrayal. Madam Park's smile never reached her eyes. You look so much like her. I wonder, do you have her loyalty? Or did she pass her treachery to you as well? Nova's voice came out steadier than she felt. I don't know what you're talking about. I've never betrayed anyone. Not yet, Madam Park said softly. She stood, picking up the gun and sliding it back into her handbag. But you will have to choose, Nova Sterling. Your mother chose love over loyalty, chose an American spy over family, and that choice has consequences that echo through generations. She walked past Nova, pausing to whisper in her ear. The architect is watching, and when the time comes, you will learn that some games were rigged from the beginning. Then she was gone, leaving only the photograph on the table and the scent of expensive perfume in the air. Taehyun picked up the photograph, studying it for a long moment before sliding it across to Nova. Keep it, he said. You should know what she looked like when she was happy, before everything fell apart. Nova stared at the image of her mother's smiling face and realized with sickening clarity that she was about to discover why her mother had run and why running might not be enough to save her. Friday night at Huaro was chaos. Every table packed, the kitchen a symphony of shouting and sizzling meat, the air thick with garlic, sesame oil, and the din of 100 conversations. Nova moved through the controlled pandemonium carrying a tray of banchan, her mind still reeling from Madam Park's visit and the photograph she now kept hidden in her locker. Taehyun sat in his usual booth, alone this time. He was speaking quietly into his phone, his expression tense. The front door opened. 3 men in business suits entered. Nova's instincts screamed wrong before her conscious mind caught up. Their suits were expensive, but fit poorly tailored for concealment, not style. They moved with synchronous precision, not the casual gait of dinner guests. Their eyes swept the room in a tactical pattern, cataloging exits and angles. And there, the telltale bulge under the left arm of the lead man's jacket. Something her father had taught her kicked in. Not a memory she could name, but an awareness that felt like instinct. The way they scanned the room, the way their hands hovered near their jackets, the way one was already moving to flank the kitchen entrance. Like the tiger and serpent from her father's stories, one draws attention while the other circles behind. Nova's body moved before thought. She saw it unfold in slow motion, the lead assassin's hand moving toward his jacket, the flash of metal, Taehyun's back to the door, vulnerable, unaware. "Get down!" Nova screamed. The tray of banchan crashed to the floor as she launched herself forward, slamming into Taehyun's shoulder with her full weight. They hit the booth's leather seat just as the first suppressed shot shattered the wine glass where Taehyun's head had been a heartbeat earlier. Chaos erupted. Screams. Breaking glass, the wet thud of bullets hitting wood and plaster. Nova rolled, her eyes catching the reflection in the polished silver water pitcher on the next table. 2 assassins advancing from the front, one circling toward the kitchen entrance, a flanking maneuver. "Left side," she shouted to Jinwoo, who had already drawn his weapon. "One coming through the kitchen." Jinwoo's eyes widened. How did she know? But he pivoted, firing twice toward the kitchen entrance. A grunt of pain confirmed the hit. The lead assassin raised his weapon, aiming at Nova and Taehyun's position. Nova grabbed a metal serving tray from the fallen cart and hurled it like a discus. It spun through the air and cracked into the assassin's wrist, deflecting his shot. The bullet buried itself in the ceiling, raining plaster dust. Taehyun stared at her, shock and something else recognition flashing across his face. Jinwoo took down the second assassin with 2 precise shots. The third tried to run, but Nova was already moving. She grabbed the decorative marble chopstick holder from the nearest table and threw it with devastating accuracy, hitting the assassin's knee. He went down hard, his weapon skittering across the floor. Jinwoo was on him in seconds, gun pressed to his temple. The entire attack had lasted maybe 15 seconds. The restaurant was a war zone. Overturned tables, shattered glass, terrified patrons huddled under booths. But Nova stood in the center of it, breathing hard, Her server's uniform splattered with someone else's blood, her posture balanced and ready instincts she shouldn't have but somehow did. Taehyun rose slowly from the floor, his gaze locked on her with an intensity that made her skin burn. "Who are you?" he demanded. That wasn't luck. That was training. Nova opened her mouth, but no explanation came. Because she didn't have one. She shouldn't know how to read a flanking maneuver. She shouldn't know throwing angles and impact points. She shouldn't know any of this. But her body knew. Her instincts knew. The tiger always circles behind. The serpent strikes when you're not looking. Her father's voice echoed in her memory. Had he been teaching her more than fairy tales? Before she could answer, Jinwoo yanked the captured assassin to his feet. Blood ran from the man's nose, but his eyes held cold defiance. Taehyun stepped forward, speaking rapid Mandarin. The assassin spat in response. Then his eyes found Nova, and he smiled a broken, bloody smile that sent ice through her veins. "Chen-wei 派来问候，你母亲的女儿." Chen-wei sends his regards. "Your mother's daughter." Taehyun's face went white. What did he say? But Nova understood. Chen-wei, leader of the Jade Dragon Triad, the name from her nightmares, from her father's warnings before he died. The assassin laughed, then bit down hard. Foam bubbled from his lips' cyanide capsule. He was dead before he hit the floor. Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Taehyun grabbed Nova's arm, his grip iron tight. "You have 10 seconds to decide," he said, his voice urgent. "The police will ask questions you can't answer. They'll dig into your background, and when the triad finds out you're in custody, you're dead. Or you come with me right now, and I protect you while we figure out what the hell you really are." Nova looked at the dead assassin, at the destroyed restaurant, at the police lights already visible through the shattered windows. She thought of her mother's photograph, of the ring, of the skills she possessed but couldn't explain, of the target painted on her back. "I can't just disappear," Nova whispered. "I have school, my life. Your life ended the moment you recognized that ring." Taehyun cut her off. "Choose, investigation or survival." The sirens were deafening now. Nova looked into Taehyun's eyes and saw the truth. Her normal life was already gone. Had been gone since the moment she'd spoken Korean to a man who recognized her mother's fire in her blood. "Okay," she breathed. Taehyun didn't wait. He pulled her toward the kitchen exit as Jinwoo covered their retreat. They burst through the back door into the freezing December night. A black SUV screeched to a halt in the alley. The door flew open. "Move!" Jinwoo shouted. They dove inside. The vehicle rocketed forward, tires screaming on wet pavement. Through the rear window, Nova watched Hwaro recede her job, her paycheck, her carefully constructed normal life, disappearing into the distance. Nova's hands were shaking violently now. The adrenaline was crashing, and her head felt light. "I think I'm going to." Then everything went black. Nova woke to silk against her skin and the scent of expensive coffee. For one disoriented moment, she thought she was dreaming. Then memory crashed back. Gunfire, blood, the assassin's dying smile. She bolted upright in a bed that wasn't hers, wearing clothes that weren't hers, in a room that looked like it belonged in Architectural Digest. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Central Park spread below like a living map, winter-bare trees stark against morning snow. The bedroom was all clean lines and muted luxury cream walls, minimalist furniture, abstract art worth more than her entire student debt. A prison wrapped in cashmere. "You're awake." Nova spun. Taehyun stood in the doorway holding 2 mugs, dressed in dark slacks and a crisp white shirt, looking infuriatingly composed. "Where am I?" Nova demanded, pulling the silk robe tighter around herself. "Where are my clothes?" "What?" "My penthouse. Burned them blood evidence. You've been unconscious for 14 hours. Adrenaline crash." He set a mug on the nightstand. "Drink. We need to talk." Nova didn't touch the coffee. "I want to go home." "You don't have a home anymore." Taehyun's voice was flat, factual. He pulled out his phone, swiped through images, then turned the screen toward her. Security camera footage showed 3 men in tactical gear entering her Washington Heights building. Timestamp, 3:47 a.m. They picked her apartment lock in 12 seconds. They tossed your place 4 hours ago, Taehyun said. Looking for anything your mother might have left you. Documents, drives, anything. They found nothing because there was nothing to find. Nova's hands clenched into fists. You let them break into my apartment? I couldn't stop them without revealing we'd already extracted you. He swiped again. Another image. Her apartment, destroyed. Mattress slashed open. Books scattered. Her laptop smashed to pieces. But I did have Jinwoo retrieve what mattered. He gestured to the corner where 2 duffel bags sat, neatly packed. Her textbooks. Her mother's wooden jewelry box, the one thing she'd kept from childhood. Her few pieces of clothing that weren't work uniforms. Her entire life condensed into 2 bags. The Jade Dragon Triad put out a bounty this morning, Taehyun continued, his tone clinical. $75,000 for Nova Sterling, alive and unharmed. They want to question you about your mother's intelligence cache. They think you know where she hid the files. I don't know anything, Nova's voice cracked. I was 5 years old when she left. I barely remember her face. It doesn't matter what you know. It matters what they think you know. Taehyun set his phone on the dresser and met her eyes. Your phone is at the bottom of the Hudson River. Your apartment is compromised. Your school has been notified you're taking a medical leave. Your bank accounts are frozen as a precaution. As of this moment, Nova Sterling is off the grid. The walls felt like they were closing in. The luxury apartment with its $1 million view was just a different kind of cage. So I'm your prisoner, Nova whispered. You're under my protection, Taehyun corrected. There's a difference. Is there? Something flickered in his expression, almost like regret, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Jinwoo entered without knocking, carrying a tablet. Boss, you need to see this. Taehyun took the device, his face darkening as he scrolled. Nova watched tension ripple across his features. He turned the tablet toward her. Surveillance photographs. Dozens of them. Nova walking to class. Nova leaving the library. Nova buying coffee. Nova entering Huaro for work. Timestamps going back 6 weeks. Some were professional quality telephoto lenses. Perfect framing. Others were grainier, clearly taken from vehicles or street cameras. They've been watching you for over a month, Taehyun said quietly. The Triad knew exactly who you were before you ever noticed that ring. Nova's blood turned to ice. 6 weeks. They'd been tracking her, cataloging her movements, learning her routines. The attack wasn't random. It was calculated. She'd never been safe at all. But there's something else, Jinwoo said, his voice tight. He swiped to a different image. This one was older, grainier, a photograph of a photograph. A teenage girl, maybe 16, with Nova's eyes and cheekbones. She stood next to a man in a dark suit, both of them in front of a traditional Korean hanok house. Nova's mother, younger, vibrant, alive, but it was the man next to her that made Nova's world tilt. He wore the same ring Taehyun now possessed. That's my father, Taehyun said, his voice rough. Park Jin-ho, taken 26 years ago in Seoul. Nova stared at the photo, her mind racing. Her mother would have been 17, young, before Nova was born, before everything. Your mother wasn't just an operative, Taehyun continued. She was being groomed to marry into the family. She was supposed to be my stepmother. The revelation hit Nova like a physical blow. Then she met someone else, Taehyun said. An American, a black CIA agent working deep cover in Seoul. They fell in love. She got pregnant. His eyes found hers. She got pregnant with you. Nova couldn't breathe. The pieces were clicking together, forming a picture she didn't want to see. My father gave her a choice. Abort the child and stay with the family, or leave and never come back. She chose you. And when she left, she took 20 years of intelligence with her insurance. She called it protection. Taehyun stepped closer, and Nova saw the complexity in his expression. Anger, respect, something that might have been grief. The Jade Dragon Triad wants revenge for the deals that Intel destroyed, but there's something else they want more. He paused. Your mother stole something from them too. Something irreplaceable. A ledger containing the names of every political official, police chief, and judge they own from Seoul to San Francisco. He pulled out another photograph. This one showed a small black notebook, leather-bound, with gold Korean characters embossed on the cover. That ledger is worth $50 million on the black market. And according to our intelligence, Taehyun's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Your mother left you a clue about where to find it. Nova's hands shook. I don't have any clue. I don't. Your father, Taehyun interrupted. James Sterling. Before he died 3 years ago, he sent you something. A package. Think, Nova. What did he send you? Nova's mind raced back. Her father's death had been sudden heart attack in their Chicago apartment. After the funeral, after the grief, there had been a package. Small, wrapped in brown paper. She'd thought it was junk, sentimental garbage she'd shoved in a box, and the jewelry box? Nova breathed. My mother's jewelry box. He sent it back to me. I thought it was just memories. Taehyun and Jin-woo exchanged a look. Where is it now? Taehyun asked. Nova pointed with a trembling hand toward the duffel bags. There. I brought it with me from every foster home, every apartment. It's all I have left of her. Jin-woo retrieved the wooden box, small, carved with traditional Korean designs, its lacquer faded with age. He handed it to Taehyun, who set it on the bed between them. It looked innocuous, just an old jewelry box. But as Nova stared at it, really looked at it for the first time in years, she saw something she'd missed. The dimensions were wrong. The interior was shallower than the exterior suggested, by about 2 inches. There's a false bottom, she whispered. Taehyun's eyes blazed with intensity. Open it. Nova's hands shook as she reached for the box. She'd carried this thing for 20 years, slept with it under her pillow in foster care, kept it close through every move and every loss, and she'd never known what it really was. A hiding place. Just as her fingers touched the carved wood, Taehyun's phone exploded with alerts. Jin-woo's went off simultaneously. Both men's faces drained of color as they read the messages. What? Nova demanded. What is it? Taehyun looked up, and for the first time since she'd met him, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. The triad just doubled the bounty to 150,000, he said slowly. But that's not the problem. He turned his phone toward her. A live news broadcast showed Columbia University's campus. Police tape, ambulances, a body bag being loaded into a coroner's van. The headline scrolled across the bottom. Student found dead on Columbia campus identified as linguistics major. Nova's vision tunneled. That could have been her. Should have been her. If she'd been in class this morning. They killed someone they thought was you, Jin-woo said grimly. A student. Innocent. Wrong place, wrong time, wrong resemblance. The broadcast cut to a reporter interviewing a detective. Suspect the killer mistook the victim for Nova Sterling, who's been reported missing since last night's restaurant shooting. Taehyun killed the feed. The silence was deafening. They're not playing anymore, he said quietly. They're sending a message. Find Nova Sterling, or everyone who looks like her dies until they do. Nova stared at the jewelry box in her hands, at the false bottom that held secrets she didn't understand, at the life she'd never chosen but could no longer escape. An innocent person was dead. Because of her. Because of her mother. Because of a past that refused to stay buried. Open it, Taehyun said again, his voice urgent now. Whatever's inside, it's worth killing for. We need to know what we're dealing with. Nova's fingers found the hidden latch she'd never known existed. The false bottom clicked open. Inside was a USB drive wrapped in a piece of paper. Nova unfolded it with trembling hands. Her mother's handwriting. Korean characters, faded but legible. Seya seya parangseya. 호랑이와 뱀의 보물이 산 밑에 있다. Little bird, blue bird. The treasure of the tiger and serpent lies beneath the mountain. What does that mean? Taehyun demanded. But Nova's blood had turned to ice, because she knew that phrase. Her father used to sing it to her as a lullaby, a children's song about a blue bird and hidden treasure. She thought it was just a song. It's a riddle, Nova whispered. My father. He used to tell me stories. about a tiger and a serpent who fought over treasure. The tiger was someone trusted, someone powerful. The serpent was the betrayer, hiding in plain sight. He made me memorize every detail. I thought they were just bedtime stories. Taehyun's eyes went wide. Your father encoded your mother's intelligence into children's stories. He trained you to remember without knowing what you were remembering. Nova looked up at him, understanding crashing over her like a wave. I am the ledger, she breathed. Everything my mother stole, it's not on a drive or in a book. It's in my memory, in stories I've known my whole life. The implications hit them all simultaneously. Then you're not just worth 150,000 to the triad, Jinwoo said, his voice hollow. You're worth everything. Taehyun's phone buzzed again. He glanced at it, and every muscle in his body went rigid. We need to move, he said, his voice sharp with urgency. Now. What? Why? He showed her the security feed from the building's lobby. 12 men in tactical gear were entering the building. Military-grade weapons. Coordinated movements. They found us, Taehyun said. And they're not coming to negotiate. Alarms began shrieking through the penthouse. Nova clutched the jewelry box to her chest as Taehyun grabbed her arm. Stay close to me, he ordered. Because if they take you alive, what they'll do to extract those memories will make death look like mercy. The elevator chimed. They were out of time. The elevator doors opened on the 48th floor. 6 seconds until the assault team reached the penthouse. Taehyun pulled Nova toward the private elevator, the one that bypassed all floors and dropped straight to the underground garage. Jinwoo covered their retreat, his weapon trained on the hallway. Boss, Jinwoo called out, urgency cutting through his usually calm voice. Before we run, you need to see this. We don't have time. Her fingerprints came back. Jinwoo's voice was sharp. CIA database. Flagged. Classified at the highest level. Taehyun froze. He looked at Nova with new eyes, not curiosity now, but calculation. Suspicion. What did you say? Jinwoo held up his tablet as automatic weapons fire echoed from the stairwell the assault team had breached the floor. Nova Sterling's prints are in the federal system, but they're locked behind clearances I've never seen. The kind reserved for deep cover operatives and their families. Taehyun's hand tightened on Nova's arm. Who are you, really? I don't know what he's talking about, Nova protested. But even as she said it, pieces clicked together. Her father's paranoia. The way he'd trained her in games that were actually surveillance detection. The languages, the tactical awareness, the muscle memory she shouldn't possess. Jinwoo swiped to another image, a photograph from 2004. A black man in his 30s stood in a Seoul marketplace, wearing local clothes but with eyes that screamed operative. Beside him, a younger version of Taehyun's father. James Sterling, Jinwoo said. Also known as Ghost, CIA deep cover. He worked with your father for 3 years, boss. He was the one who brokered peace between your syndicate and the Busan family. The world tilted beneath Nova's feet. That's impossible, she whispered. But it wasn't. It explained everything. Her childhood in Seoul she barely remembered. The constant moving. Her mother's secrets. Her father's death that had never felt natural. Explosions rocked the penthouse. The assault team was blowing through the door. Talk fast, Taehyun growled, dragging Nova into the private elevator. Or I leave you for them. The words tumbled out as Jinwoo jabbed the garage button and the elevator dropped like a stone. My father was CIA, Nova said, the truth finally breaking free. Deep cover in Seoul for 6 years. He embedded with the Korean syndicates to track triad weapons shipments into North America. That's how he met my mother. She was your father's translator. They fell in love. It burned his cover. The elevator plummeted. 50 floors. 40. 30. The CIA extracted him when the triads discovered he was American intelligence, Nova continued, her voice cracking. But they couldn't get my mother out fast enough. She was pregnant with me. Your father protected her, gave her that ring as a promise she'd always have sanctuary in the family. When I was born, they smuggled us to America. 20 floors. 15. Your father didn't betray the syndicate, Nova said, looking at Taehyun. He tried to save it. He warned your father about the Triad's planned takeover 3 weeks before it happened. The intelligence he took wasn't stolen, it was insurance. Protection for my mother and me if the Triads ever came looking. 10 floors. 5. Taehyun's jaw worked, processing, calculating. And he taught you everything. I didn't know that's what he was doing, Nova admitted. Languages were games. Tactical awareness was paying attention. Reading people was understanding body language. The tiger and serpent stories, I thought they were fairy tales. But he was teaching me to recognize patterns, to see betrayal before it happened. He trained me like I was an operative, but I thought I was just his daughter learning to be smart. The elevator slammed to a stop in the garage. The Triad wants me because they think I have his files, Nova finished. But the files aren't on drives or in safes. They're in my head. Every dead drop location, every compromised official, every weapons route my father made me memorize them as stories and songs and games. I'm not just a target. The elevator doors opened to reveal the underground garage and Jinwoo's black SUV waiting with the engine running. I'm a living intelligence archive, Nova said. Taehyun stared at her, and she saw the moment his perception shifted. She wasn't a helpless waitress anymore. She was a weapon, an asset, something far more dangerous than either of them had realized. Get in the car, he ordered. They sprinted toward the SUV. Nova's hand was on the door handle when Jinwoo's voice cracked like a whip. Boss, down! Nova turned in time to see the muzzle flash from the garage's upper level. The shot missed Jinwoo by inches, sparking off the concrete pillar beside him. 5 figures rappelled down from the maintenance catwalks. Not Triad assassins this time. These men wore tactical gear with Korean characters stenciled on their vests. Military. Or close enough. That's not Triad. Jinwoo breathed, his face going white. Boss, those are Park family enforcers, Taehyun finished, his voice hollow. The lead operative landed smoothly, raising his rifle. But he didn't point it at Nova or Taehyun. He pointed it at Jinwoo. Park Taehyun, the operative called out in Korean. By order of the family council, you are under arrest for harboring an enemy operative. Surrender the American intelligence asset, or be declared traitor to the family. Nova's blood turned to ice. What? Taehyun's face had gone expressionless, the mask of a man who'd just lost everything. The woman in black at the restaurant, he said quietly. My aunt, head of the family council. She knew exactly who you were. She sent those photographs to force my hand. He looked at Nova, and she saw the terrible choice playing out behind his eyes. She's been waiting for proof that your mother's daughter existed, Taehyun continued. And I handed it to her on a silver platter. Now the council wants you dead to erase your father's intelligence, and they want me dead for protecting you. The operatives advanced, weapons raised. Last chance, Taehyun, the lead man called. Give us the girl and accept exile, or die with her as a traitor. Nova watched Taehyun's hand move toward the gun at his hip, watched him calculate odds that didn't exist. 5 trained operatives with automatic weapons versus him and Jinwoo. It was suicide. Don't, Nova whispered. I'm not worth dying for. Taehyun looked at her, and something fierce and reckless burned in his eyes. The hell you're not, he said. Then he drew his weapon and fired. The garage exploded into chaos, and Nova realized with stunning clarity that she and Taehyun were now fugitives from both sides of a war neither of them had chosen but both would have to survive, if they lived through the next 60 seconds. Taehyun's shot took down the lead operative. Jinwoo dropped 2 more with precision fire, but the remaining 2 scattered behind concrete pillars, returning fire in controlled bursts that pinned them behind the SUV. Then the ceiling exploded. Not metaphorically, literally. Shaped charges blew 3 holes through the garage ceiling, raining concrete and rebar. Black-clad figures rappelled down through the smoke like spiders descending on prey. Triad assault team. 8 operatives. Military-grade hardware. You've got to be kidding me, Jinwoo breathed. Now they were caught between 2 hostile forces. Park family enforcers on one side, Triad killers on the other, and the only exit blocked by crossfire. We need to move, Nova shouted. But there was nowhere to go. A flashbang detonated. The world went white and silent. Nova felt hands grab her, Taehyun hauling her toward a maintenance corridor she hadn't seen. Jinwoo laid down, covering fire, his shots impossibly accurate despite the chaos. They crashed through a service door into a narrow hallway lined with pipes and electrical conduits. Behind them, the two hostile forces opened fire on each other, creating a deadly crossfire that bought them precious seconds. This way! Taehyun pulled her toward a freight elevator. Service access to the parking sublevel. They piled inside. The elevator groaned downward as bullets punched through the doors, creating shafts of light in the darkness. Nova counted seconds. Each one could be their last. The doors opened to reveal an older section of parking garage, concrete stained with decades of oil and grime. Jinwoo's backup vehicle sat waiting, a nondescript gray sedan with reinforced panels and a souped-up engine. They were inside and moving before the elevator doors fully closed behind them. Jinwoo floored it up the exit ramp. They burst onto the street just as the Triad assault team reached the sublevel. A spray of automatic fire shattered the sedan's rear window. FDR drive, Taehyun barked. We need speed and distance. Jinwoo wove through early morning traffic like a Formula One driver, the sedan's engine roaring. They hit the FDR at 80 miles per hour, weaving between delivery trucks and taxis. Behind them, two black SUVs materialized from the Chaos Triad pursuit vehicles. They're boxing us in, Jinwoo warned as a third SUV appeared ahead, trying to cut them off near the Brooklyn Bridge exit. Nova's training kicked in without thought. Give me your phone, she demanded. Taehyun handed it over, his eyes never leaving the road. Nova's fingers flew across the screen, muscle memory guiding her through security protocols her father had made her practice 1,000 times. She accessed the city's traffic management system, old infrastructure, minimal encryption, vulnerable to anyone who knew the back doors. When I say jump, you take the Delancey exit at full speed, Nova instructed. Don't brake, don't hesitate. That exit is closed for construction, Jinwoo protested. Not anymore. Nova found the traffic signal controls. The Delancey exit showed red barriers, closed signs, construction equipment blocking the ramp. She overrode the system, activated the emergency lane protocols, and rerouted every construction vehicle's GPS to report a gas leak evacuation. Now, she screamed. Jinwoo cranked the wheel. They shot toward the closed exit at 90 miles per hour. The barriers ahead looked solid, immovable. Then they started moving. Construction vehicles suddenly roared to life, their automated safety systems pulling them clear of the gas leak zone Nova had fabricated. The barriers retracted. They threaded through the gap with inches to spare. The lead pursuit SUV wasn't so lucky. It clipped a barrier that hadn't fully retracted, spinning out and creating a chain reaction that blocked the exit. But two SUVs were still behind them. Jinwoo cut through the Lower East Side, tires screaming around corners. Nova worked frantically, hijacking traffic lights, creating green corridors and red walls that forced their pursuers into delays measured in critical seconds. Where are we going? Nova asked as they plunged into the Brooklyn Battery Tunnel. Red Hook, Taehyun said. Old warehouse district. I have a Safehouse. No. Nova's voice was sharp. Red Hook is compromised. My father used it in 2008. If the Triad has his old files, they'll have surveillance there. Taehyun's head whipped toward her. How do you know that? Bedtime story, Nova said grimly. The tale of the red fish in the hooked bay. He encoded every Safehouse location in stories. Red Hook, the red fish, it's burned. They burst out of the tunnel into Brooklyn. Behind them, one pursuit SUV had caught up. Ahead, she could see the industrial waterfront warehouses, shipping containers, abandoned factories. There, Nova pointed to a massive complex of brick buildings. The old Navy Yard. My father called it the fortress where sailors became ships. It has underground access to the subway maintenance tunnels. We can disappear. Jinwoo didn't question her. He cranked the wheel, the sedan fishtailing onto a side street that barely looked wide enough. They squeezed between two buildings, scraping paint from both sides, and emerged into the Navy Yard's sprawling grounds. The pursuit SUV tried to follow, too wide. It wedged itself between the buildings with a screech of tortured metal. They'd lost them. Jinwoo killed the engine in the shadow of a derelict warehouse. For a moment, the only sound was their ragged breathing. "That was insane," Jinwoo said. "That was training," Taehyun corrected, looking at Nova with new respect and wariness. "Your father turned you into a living weapon, and you didn't even know it." Nova stared at her hands. They were shaking now, adrenaline finally crashing. She'd just hacked municipal infrastructure, orchestrated an escape from professional killers, and navigated using intelligence she'd thought were children's stories. Her father had prepared her for war, and she was only beginning to understand what that meant. Taehyun's phone buzzed. His face went pale as he read the message. "What?" Nova asked, dread pooling in her stomach. He turned the screen toward her. A video, grainy surveillance footage. A woman, Asian, elegant, in her 50s, being dragged from a car in what looked like Seoul. The timestamp read 43 minutes ago. The woman looked up at the camera. She had Nova's eyes. "That's not possible," Nova whispered. "My mother is dead. She's been dead for 20 years. "No," Taehyun said quietly. "She's been in hiding for 20 years, and the triad just found her." The video's audio kicked in. The woman's voice, speaking Korean with an American accent. "Nova, if you're watching this, they've found me. They'll kill me in 48 hours unless you trade yourself. The ledger for my life. They're waiting at—" The feed cut to black. A new message appeared. "Sunset Pier, Red Hook. Tomorrow, 8 p.m. Come alone or she dies screaming." Nova's world fractured. Her mother alive. Captured. Being used as bait. Taehyun was already on his phone, calling someone. "We need to verify this is real. Chen Wei's people will know if—" "It's real," Nova interrupted, her voice hollow. She pointed at the frozen frame on the screen. "See that scar on her left hand, between her thumb and forefinger? She got it when I was 4. I cut myself on broken glass and she grabbed it without thinking. She never told me that story, but I remember watching her wrap her hand while she held mine." She looked up at Taehyun. "That's my mother, and she's alive." And Nova realized she was the only one who could save her, or die trying. The warehouse smelled of rust, decay, and decades of abandonment. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness. Nova's breath formed clouds in the freezing air as she pressed her back against a concrete pillar, watching Taehyun pace like a caged predator. They'd spent the night in the Navy Yard warehouse, planning. 3 of Taehyun's enforcers had found them wounded from the garage battle, but alive. Jinwoo had patched them up as best he could. "We can't stay here," Taehyun said, checking his weapon. "I have contacts in Newark. We extract across the river, disappear into Jersey. Running means dying slowly," Nova interrupted. "They have my mother. They'll hunt us forever." "Your mother made her choices 20 years ago, and I'm making mine now." Nova stood, meeting his eyes. "We make a stand. Here. Tonight. The exchange is supposed to be at Sunset Pier, but they'll expect us there. We control the location. We bring them here, where we have the advantage." Taehyun stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "We have 4 men, Jinwoo and 3 enforcers who are probably bleeding out, against the entire Jade Dragon triad." "Against whoever shows up," Nova corrected. "And I'm counting on Chen Wei showing up personally. He wants the ledger. He wants me. He won't send subordinates for something this valuable." Before Taehyun could respond, Jinwoo's radio crackled. "Boss, we've got movement. Multiple vehicles. Coming in fast." The warehouse's rusted loading doors exploded inward. Not breached with explosives, simply kicked open by men who knew they didn't need stealth. 15 operatives in tactical gear flooded through, weapons raised, moving with military precision. They fanned out, covering every angle, trapping Nova and Taehyun's small group in the center of the vast space. Then he entered. Chen Wei moved like a knife through water, smooth, deadly, inevitable. He was in his 60s but carried himself with the coiled power of a much younger man. His face was carved from granite, and his gaze held the cold calculation of someone who'd ordered 1,000 deaths without losing sleep. "Park Taehyun," Chen Wei said in Mandarin-accented English. The prodigal son protecting his father's ghost. How touching. He turned his gaze to Nova, and she felt the weight of it like a physical thing. And Nova Sterling, the daughter who inherited more than her mother's eyes. He smiled, a predator's smile. You have something that belongs to me. Intelligence your father stole. Names, locations, account numbers. 20 years of my organization's secrets locked in that pretty head. I don't have your files, Nova said, forcing her voice steady. Liar. Chen Wei's voice cracked like a whip. He gestured, and 2 operatives dragged a figure forward. Nova's mother, bruised, bleeding, but alive. Her eyes found Nova's across the warehouse, and 20 years of grief and longing crashed between them in a single glance. The files, Chen Wei repeated. Or I kill her in front of you. Then I kill everyone here. Then I burn down every place you've ever lived and kill everyone who's ever known your name. Taehyun raised his weapon. 15 guns swiveled toward him. Don't, Chen Wei said calmly. You're outgunned. This ends one way. Nova tells me everything. I verify the intelligence, and maybe I let some of you live. He pulled out a knife, pressing it against Yoonhee's throat. You have 10 seconds to decide. Nova's mind raced. 4 men against 15. No escape routes. Her mother's life balanced on a blade's edge. The intelligence in her head worth more than all their lives combined. Wait, she said. I'll tell you, but not here. Not like this. Chen Wei's eyes narrowed. You're not in a position to negotiate. Actually, Nova said, her voice gaining strength as the pieces clicked together. I'm in the only position that matters. Because the intelligence you want, it's not just about your organization. She took a step forward. Taehyun hissed a warning, but she ignored him. My father didn't just steal your files, Chen Wei. He stole everyone's files, including, she paused, letting the word hang, the files on your partners within the Park Syndicate. The moles you've been running inside Taehyun's organization for years. The temperature in the warehouse dropped 10 degrees. Taehyun's head snapped toward her. What are you talking about? Chen Wei's expression didn't change, but Nova saw the micro-tension in his jaw. Confirmation. The tiger and the serpent, Nova said quietly. My father's bedtime story. The tiger was someone trusted, someone close, someone with access to both organizations. The serpent was the betrayer hiding in plain sight. She turned to look directly at one of Taehyun's enforcers, the man who'd been quiet throughout their entire escape, who'd survived the garage ambush unscathed, who'd known every move they'd make. Isn't that right, Minjun? The enforcer's face drained of color. Then he pulled his gun and aimed it at Taehyun's head. I'm sorry, boss, Minjun said. But they're paying better. Chen Wei laughed, a sound like breaking glass. And Nova realized she'd just turned a hostage situation into a powder keg, one spark away from annihilation. Minjun's gun was steady, aimed at Taehyun's skull. But Nova saw something else, the slight tremor in his other hand, the sweat beading on his temple despite the cold. Fear. He was terrified, not of Taehyun, of being exposed. Nova took another step forward, hands raised, speaking in fluent Mandarin directly to Chen Wei. Nibe Liongla. You've been played. Chen Wei's eyes narrowed. Careful, girl. I decide who lives and dies here. Boo. Nibe Jadal. No, you don't. Nova's voice rang clear through the warehouse. Because Minjun doesn't work for you. He works for himself, and he's been using both your organizations as pawns for 4 years. She's lying, Minjun shouted. Boss, she's desperate. March 3rd, 2019. Nova interrupted, her voice cutting through his protest. She switched to English, addressing everyone now. An arms shipment worth $8 million disappeared from a Port Newark container. The triads blamed the Koreans. The Koreans blamed internal theft. It nearly started a war that would have killed hundreds and destabilized the entire East Coast. Chen Wei's hand tightened on the knife at Yoonhee's throat. Everyone knows that story. But not everyone knows who really stole it, Nova said. She turned to Minjun. The tiger who wore 2 faces. The trusted lieutenant with gambling debts he couldn't pay. The man who needed a war to cover his theft and create chaos he could profit from. Minjun's gun wavered. My father documented everything, Nova continued, her voice gaining power. The shipping manifest was altered by someone with access to both organizations' logistics. The Bitcoin wallet where the profits were funneled, 1A7X9K4MP3VQZ2HF, registered to a shell company in the Caymans. And the surveillance footage from Warehouse 7B in Flushing shows you, Minjun, meeting with Triad operatives. She paused, letting it sink in. But you weren't selling information to Chen Wei. You were selling him a war. Because in chaos, a man smart enough can become invisible, rich enough to disappear, powerful enough to start his own operation. Chen Wei's face had gone from stone to volcanic rage. Is this true? She has no proof, Minjun snarled. But his gun was shaking now. Nova reached slowly into her pocket. Every weapon in the warehouse tracked her movement. She pulled out the USB drive from her mother's jewelry box. My father's insurance, she said. Every transaction, every communication, every piece of evidence he collected over 6 years, including, she looked at Chen Wei, the proof that your trusted advisor, Li Zhao, was Minjun's partner. They planned to eliminate both of you and merge the territories under their control. The name hit Chen Wei like a physical blow. Li Zhao, his consigliere, the man who'd been by his side for 15 years. Li Zhao died 6 months ago, Chen Wei said slowly. Heart attack. Poisoned, Nova corrected. By Minjun, because Li got cold feet and wanted to confess. My father predicted it in his final reports. The tiger always eats his partners. The warehouse went silent except for the sound of water dripping somewhere in the darkness. Chen Wei's operatives shifted, no longer certain who the enemy was. Taehyun's remaining men raised their weapons, aiming at Minjun instead of the Triad. Minjun saw it happening, his careful house of cards collapsing, his face twisted with rage and desperation. You know what? He spat. She's right. About all of it. I set up the deal. I framed both of you. I killed Li, and I was this close to watching you tear each other apart while I walked away with everything. He swung his gun toward Nova. But if I'm going down, I'm taking the ghost's daughter with me. Taehyun moved. One fluid motion. He drew and fired before Minjun could complete his turn. The shot echoed through the warehouse like thunder. Minjun dropped, a perfect hole in his forehead, the traitor's eyes already empty. The silence that followed was absolute. Chen Wei stared at Minjun's corpse, then at Nova, then at the USB drive in her hand. Slowly, deliberately, he removed the knife from Yoonhee's throat and released her. Nova's mother stumbled forward. Nova caught her, 20 years of grief collapsing into a single embrace. Her mother's whispered Korean words. Natal, Natal, my daughter, broke something in Nova's chest. Chen Wei stepped forward, his men parting like water. He studied Nova with new eyes, not a target, but an asset, a threat, a player. Your father was brilliant, he said quietly. He saw the board when the rest of us were playing checkers, and he turned his daughter into a weapon none of us could fight. He looked at Taehyun. We've been enemies because men like Minjun wanted us to be. How many others like him exist? How many more wars have been manufactured for profit? Taehyun's jaw worked. Then he lowered his weapon. The girl has the evidence, Chen Wei continued. She can destroy both our organizations or forge them into something stronger, united instead of divided. He turned to Nova, and she saw respect in those cold eyes for the first time. I propose an alliance, Chen Wei said. Triad and syndicate, working together. And you, Nova Sterling, he paused, as our strategic intelligence advisor. The bridge between worlds. The one person both sides trust because she holds the keys to both our destructions. Nova looked at her mother's battered face, at Taehyun's calculating expression, at the 15 Triad operatives who moments ago would have killed her without hesitation. She thought of her father's stories, the tiger and the serpent, the bluebird who saw treasures others missed, the lessons encoded in lullabies. He'd prepared her for this exact moment. I have conditions, Nova said, her voice steady. Chen Wei smiled, genuine this time. I expected nothing less. Before anyone could speak, Nova's phone buzzed. Then Taehyun's. Then Chen Wei's. All simultaneously. They looked at their screens. The messages were identical. A video. Real-time footage. Madam Park Taehyun's aunt, the woman in black sitting in what looked like a command center, surrounded by screens and armed operatives. Her voice came through cold and aristocratic. How touching. The triad and the traitor syndicate making peace. Unfortunately, the Park Family Council has other plans. Behind her, screens lit up showing live feeds. Columbia University, Nova's old apartment building, Huaro restaurant where this all began. Each location rigged with enough explosives to level a city block. You have 1 hour, she continued. Nova Sterling surrenders to face family justice for her mother's crimes, or I detonate all 3 locations. Hundreds will die. The choice is yours. The feed cut to black. Nova's blood turned to ice. She's insane. She's desperate, Taehyun corrected, his face ashen. The council knows I've gone rogue. If we unite with Chen Wei, they lose everything: power, territory, control. This is their endgame. Chen Wei's expression was grim. My men can evacuate 2 locations in an hour. Maybe. But not all 3, Nova finished. Then Nova's phone buzzed again. A private message. This time, from an unknown number. You think you're clever, little bird? Your father taught you games. I taught him. Meet me at the place where everything began, or watch your new world burn. Come alone. The architect. Nova's hands trembled. The architect, a name her father had whispered in nightmares. The puppet master behind the CIA operation that had trapped him in Seoul. The one person he'd feared more than death. Nova? Taehyun's voice seemed distant. What is it? She looked up, seeing the alliance she'd just forged, the mother she'd just found, the man who'd risked everything to protect her. I know who's really behind this, Nova whispered, and I'm the only one who can stop them. Nova made her decision. Chen Wei, evacuate Columbia and the apartment building. Taehyun, take my mother somewhere safe. I'm going to meet the architect. Alone? Taehyun grabbed her arm. That's suicide. No, Nova said, meeting his eyes. It's the endgame. And I was trained for this my entire life without knowing it. She looked at her mother, seeing understanding in Yoonhee's eyes. Your father knew this day would come, her mother said softly in Korean. That's why he taught you everything. Go finish what we started, little bird. Nova nodded once, then turned and walked toward the warehouse exit. Behind her, she heard Taehyun give orders, Chen Wei coordinating his men, the sound of an alliance being forged in crisis. And Nova Sterling walked alone into the night, toward the final confrontation with the person who'd orchestrated her entire life. The confrontation with the architect Madam Park happened at Huaro, where Nova came prepared with evidence, allies, and the intelligence to dismantle her web of control. The Park Family Council fractured. Madam Park was defeated and placed under house arrest. The alliance held. 3 months pass. 3 months later, Huaro gleamed like a jewel in the heart of Koreatown. The bullet holes were patched and painted over, the shattered glass replaced, new tables, new chairs, but the same heart. But everyone who entered remembered the night it became a battlefield, and everyone knew who'd emerged victorious. Nova Sterling sat in the private VIP room, no longer wearing a server's uniform. The designer black suit was tailored perfectly, the silk blouse underneath the color of blood. Her natural hair was styled in elegant twists, and on her left wrist, a jade bracelet caught the light, a dragon coiled around itself, eyes made of rubies. The twin to Taehyun's ring. Across the polished table, Taehyun watched her with an expression that had evolved over 3 months from suspicion to respect, to something neither had yet named. He'd traded his suit jacket for shirt sleeves, his tattoos visible in the dim light, a glass of expensive whiskey forgotten at his elbow. The Busan family accepted the terms, Nova said, reviewing documents on her tablet. She spoke in Korean, the language as natural as breathing now. They'll route their shipments through our ports in exchange for 20% of Chen Wei's distribution network in California. And Chen Wei agreed to this? Taehyun asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. He sees the value in cooperation over competition. I made him see it. Nova's smile was sharp. The data I provided about the Yakuza's expansion into his territory was very persuasive. She slid a folder across the table. Inside were surveillance photos, financial records, communications intercepts intelligence that would have been impossible to gather without her father's encoded network and her ability to access it. Taehyun flipped through the documents, his expression appreciative. You've become indispensable. I've become what my father trained me to be, Nova corrected. A bridge between worlds. She touched the jade bracelet, feeling its weight. Taehyun had presented it to her 6 weeks ago, in front of the entire Park Syndicate Council, what remained of it after the purge. A public declaration that she was untouchable, protected, valued, his equal. Your mother is safe in Vancouver, Taehyun said, changing subjects. Chenwei's men confirmed it this morning. New identity, clean papers, a life she can actually live. Nova's chest tightened. Yoonhee Sterling had disappeared again, but this time on her own terms, with enough money and protection to stay vanished. They'd had 2 weeks together after the crisis ended. 2 weeks of explanations, tears, memories reconstructed. 2 weeks to bridge 20 years of absence. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough, but it was more than Nova had ever hoped for. Thank you, she said quietly, for keeping your word. You saved my organization, Nova. You exposed the rot, forged an alliance that makes us stronger than we've been in decades, and you did it without spilling blood we couldn't afford to lose. A mother's safety is the least I owe you. The door opened. Jinwoo entered, his expression serious but not urgent. He'd been promoted to head of security after proving his loyalty through the crisis. He bowed slightly to both of them, equals now, in his estimation. Madam Park is here, he said. She's requesting an audience. Nova's expression didn't change, though Taehyun saw her fingers tighten imperceptibly on her tablet. Madam Park. Taehyun's aunt. The woman who'd tried to blow up half of Manhattan 3 months ago. The confrontation with the architect had ended her power. Nova had gone alone to meet her at Huaro's ruins that night, the place where everything began. The architect, revealed to be Madam Park herself, had orchestrated decades of conflict to maintain her power over the fractured Park family. But Nova had come prepared with evidence, with allies hidden in the shadows, and with the intelligence to dismantle the councilwoman's web of control. The Park family council had fractured. Half had been purged for supporting Madam Park's extremism. The other half now backed Taehyun's alliance with the Triad. Madam Park had been allowed to live barely under house arrest in Seoul. She wasn't supposed to be here. What is she doing in New York? Taehyun demanded, his hand moving instinctively toward his weapon. She came alone, Jinwoo said. Unarmed. She says she has information about Ghost, says it's urgent. Nova and Taehyun exchanged glances. Ghost, her father, the phantom who'd taught her everything. It could be a trap, Nova said. Of course it's a trap, Taehyun agreed. But we can't ignore it. Nova stood, smoothing her suit. Then let's find out what she wants. They found Madam Park in the main dining room. She sat alone at a corner table, wearing traditional Korean hanbok in mourning white, her silver hair pulled back severely. She looked older than Nova remembered, diminished somehow, but her eyes were still sharp. She stood as they approached, bowing with perfect formal courtesy. Nephew, she said in Korean, and Miss Sterling, thank you for seeing me. Speak, Taehyun said coldly, before I have Jinwoo escort you back to the airport. Madam Park's smile was sad. So much like your father, impatient with formality. She turned to Nova. Your father and I worked together, 23 years ago in Seoul, before you were born. Nova's skin prickled. You're lying. My father never mentioned you. No, Madam Park agreed. He wouldn't have, because I recruited him. I convinced the CIA to place him deep cover in the syndicate. I made him fall in love with Yoonhee to secure his commitment. The words hit like hammer blows. You see, Madam Park continued, her voice gentle but merciless, I was his handler. I've been running intelligence operations for 25 years. The triad, the syndicate, the CIA pieces on a board I built. That doesn't make you the architect, Nova said coldly. Just a handler. You're right. Madam Park said, I'm not the architect. I was the architect's pawn, just like everyone else. And now, she pulled out a photograph, placing it on the table. Nova looked down and felt the world tilt. The photograph showed her father, James Sterling, sitting in a cafe in what looked like Paris, but the timestamp read 3 weeks ago, 2 months after this entire crisis had ended. Your father isn't dead, Nova, Madam Park said softly. His heart attack 3 years ago was staged. He's been working off the books ever since, hunting the real architect, a network so vast and corrupt it makes our criminal empires look like children playing games. She pulled out another photograph. This one showed a man in a business suit shaking hands with someone Nova recognized, a U.S. senator. In the background, barely visible, stood her father. He's been working without backup for 3 years. Madam Park continued. No agency support, no protection. And 3 days ago, he sent me a message. 3 words. They found me. Nova's hands trembled as she picked up the photograph. Her father's face, older, harder, but unmistakably alive. Why tell us this? Tahan demanded. Why now? Because despite everything, the lies, the manipulation, he's worth saving, Madam Park said quietly. And you, Nova Sterling, are the only one who can read the trail he left. She pulled out one final document, a dossier marked with classifications Nova had never seen before. Operation Ivory Tower, Madam Park said. A transnational conspiracy involving politicians, intelligence agencies, and criminal syndicates across 17 countries. Your father stumbled onto it while cleaning up his old operations, and whoever runs it wants him dead because he knows too much. She slid the dossier toward Nova. He left breadcrumbs, clues encoded the way only he could, stories, songs, patterns you'd recognize. He's counting on you to decode them, to find him before they do. Nova stared at the dossier, her heart hammering. Her father, alive, in danger, and she was the only one who could read his trail. What's in this for you? Taehyun asked suspiciously. A chance to undo some of the damage I've caused, Madam Park said simply. And perhaps, she looked at Nova, a chance to know my son's daughter before I die. Nova looked up sharply. Your son? James Sterling is my son, Madam Park said quietly. I recruited my own child into the CIA. I made him into Ghost, and now I'm asking his daughter to save him. The revelation hung in the air. Nova picked up the dossier with trembling hands. Inside was a map with locations marked in red, 17 cities, and in the margin, handwritten in her father's distinctive script. Blue bird, fly away home! The serpent's children wait on the throne. Another riddle. Another song from her childhood. Her father was out there, alive, fighting a war she didn't understand yet, but she would. Nova looked at Taehyun. He saw the determination in her eyes and nodded slowly. We're going after him, Nova said. Not a question, a statement. Then you'll need this. Madam Park placed a black credit card on the table. Unlimited funds, untraceable, and a phone number that will connect you to operatives in every major city, people who owe me favors I've been saving for 20 years. She stood, bowing once more. Your father's last message included one more thing. A warning. She turned back, her expression grave. He said, Tell Nova the game was rigged from the start. She was never meant to survive this long. Someone wants the ghost's daughter dead even more than they want him. The door closed behind her, leaving Nova and Taehyun in ringing silence. Nova looked down at the dossier, at the breadcrumbs her father had left, at the jade bracelet on her wrist that marked her as a queen in a criminal empire. 3 months ago, she'd been a waitress trying to survive. Now she was a strategic advisor, intelligence broker, and bridge between worlds. And her father, the ghost himself, needed her to become something more. A hunter, a warrior, a player in a game so vast she couldn't yet see its edges. Taehyun's hand covered hers on the table. Whatever you need, he said quietly. Whatever this costs, We're in this together. Nova met his eyes and saw the truth there. Partnership. Respect. Something deeper that neither had named yet. She picked up the dossier and stood. Then let's go find my father, Nova said, and burn down whoever thought they could destroy my family. The game was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. And this time, Nova Sterling was playing to win. Nova's father is alive. The real architect is still out there. And she just became the most wanted woman in the world. Like, if you're ready, comment your theories, subscribe so you don't miss it.